Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.
Welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast. We are excited to welcome Conte Stamas, the head coach of Brother Rice High School. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be with you guys and looking forward to having our conversation.
So we like to start every episode with the opening tip, just to get a little background on our guest and their program. We always find it so interesting the different paths people take to get where they are. So could you tell us about like your coaching journey and kind of how you got to Brother Rice, and then a little bit about your program.
Sure. It's been a long journey. I've been coaching over 40 years at a lot of different levels at the high school, at the junior college level, Division III, Division I. So I've had a really a great journey with a wide variety of experiences on a lot of different levels. And it kind of all started when I was a senior in high school. I wasn't sure really what I wanted to do. And then my dad sat me down about middle through my senior year and said, hey, you really love sports. Did you ever think about coaching? And I really kind of hadn't thought about it at that young age. And the more I thought about it, I said, I think I want to stay involved in athletics. I do want to help people because I've had some really, really good coaches growing up. And I thought that's a way that I could give back to what helped me through my formative years. So I decided, I want to go that route, but I still wanted to play basketball. So I had some interest in some Division III schools coming out of high school, but I really wasn't interested in really doing that. So I played 2 years at Morton Junior College, and glad I did that. It was a really good experience. But I really knew it was time to look at my coaching career and my teaching career. I really, even though I love the sport, I really felt like I was really excited to go into my career. So then I went to Eastern Illinois, and I went there because of their highly regarded PE program, physical education program. And I was there for 2 years, and then I began my coaching and my teaching at Morton High School, Morton East High School at the time. It was split at that time. It was Morton East High School, and I was able to coach with my former high school coach, who kind of got me started then in coaching. And then I spent 4 years at lower levels coaching at Morton East and then Lyons Township High School before I got an opportunity to coach at Elmhurst College. So then after I got a taste of high school coaching, I really wanted to hopefully have a chance to see what college coaching was all about. And so, ironically, Alex Caruso for the Bulls, his dad was the head coach at the time at Elmhurst College. So I was able to work under Mike Caruso, who played for Eddie Sutton at Creighton. So really good guy, learned a lot. And then after the season, Morton College, where I played for 2 years, called me and they were looking for a head coach. And here at 26 years old, I'm now a head college coach. So it was and I thought I knew everything, of course, at that time, but I basically knew nothing. So I learned kind of on the job. And I think that's a great way for young coaches to learn, is to have your own team, whether it's coaching the freshman B team, whatever it is, to call your own timeouts. I think you'll learn so much more by moving 18 inches over into the head coaching seat and learning to make decisions for yourself. So having to do that at a young age, I think, was a learning experience, but also very beneficial in my growth as a coach. I stayed there for 2 years, and then an opportunity with a wider recruiting base opened up at Thornton Community College, which is now called South Suburban College. So I went out to the south suburbs and had a lot of kids from like Bloom, all those south suburbs that had a lot of talent. So I planned on staying there for a while, and then lo and behold, I write a letter to the head coach at Stetson University in Florida, because then my appetite got wet in terms of Division One. So uh, lo and behold, he got a recommendation from Digger Phelps, because I had worked the Notre Dame basketball camp for many years, and he was very impressed with the letter from Digger Phelps. So he hired me. Let me backtrack a little bit. Um, I started working basketball camps right when I started in those lower level coaching jobs at when I first started out. And how this all kind of evolved was a real close friend of mine in high school happened to become friends with a baseball player named Ron LaFleur for the Detroit Tigers years ago. And we were out having dinner one night, and he asked me what my life's ambitions were, and I said to coach in college basketball. And he says, "Well, I'm going to give you a number of a guy that I think you have to call," and his name was Dick Vitale. So I get Dick Vitale's number, and I call Dick Vitale just to try to get his input on how to get started. And his advice was to work as many summer basketball camps as I possibly could, to meet people, to learn, to network myself. So I worked Notre Dame's camp. I worked Ray Meyer's camp at DePaul up in the North Woods of Wisconsin. I worked Bobby Knight's camp. So I worked several camps, and that kind of was a catalyst in me having this ambition to coach at the Division One level. So I landed at Stetson with a legendary coach in the South named Glenn Wilkes, and tremendous guy. Again, learned a lot, and then things just kind of along the journey just kind of evolved. I had worked Xavier University's basketball camp. Who the head coach at the time was Pete Gillen, who was an assistant at Notre Dame when I was working the summer camps at Notre Dame. So an opportunity came about to go to Xavier University in Ohio, and that was probably one of the biggest and most important moves in my coaching development, was going there. I learned so much about game preparation, about recruiting. He was the type of coach that allowed his assistants to not just be recruiters, but to be involved in every phase of a college basketball program. And he was training us to be head coaches. And so that was a tremendous learning experience. And to be on the floor against guys like we played against Bobby Knight, John Thompson, Jim Calhoun, and just watching how and preparing for those teams was incredible experience. So that kind of was the catalyst in me learning how I was going to develop my philosophy in coaching. Was learning so much from Coach Gillen. And then life kind of happened where a couple of kids came along, and I had to kind of make a decision to do I want to stay in this Division One rat race and be moving my family around the country, in and out of high schools. And I made the decision that for my family that I would not do that. So I applied and got the job at Evanston High School, and spent 5 years there. Spent 9 years at Evanston, or I'm sorry, at Lyons Township High School, and then got called back to Morton College for 5 years, and then I thought I was pretty much done as a head coach. So I was helping a buddy out at Hinsdale Central for about 7 years, and then out of the blue, very late July, a couple of years ago, Brother Rice was looking for a head coach, and I said, I just retired from my teaching position, so it was something that I could really devote a lot of time into. So I was so impressed with the administration at Brother Rice that it's a challenge that I wanted to take on, and this has been one of the best experiences I've ever had in coaching, in terms of the people that you worked with. Our president played football for Bo Schembechler at Michigan. Our athletic director worked for Doug Bruno as an assistant at DePaul with the women's basketball, and Pat Summit. And our principal was a sophomore coach at Brother Rice for 20 years. So I felt really comfortable with the administrative staff at Brother Rice. And this is kind of where I'm at right now.
Well, I think we could ask about 900 follow-ups based on some of the cool things you just shared. But I do want to hit on a follow-up, and I think you are an excellent person to ask. And this is something Todd and I speak about very often. And you and I kind of texted about this a little bit off the air, but you had made the point really early on when you were talking about your journey and kind of moving over those 18 inches as a young coach and kind of learning, as you said, to run your own timeouts. But what are some things that you think young coaches need to start to develop at a young age to kind of stay in this profession for a long time? Because as Todd and I talked to so many guests, there's so many men and women that are leaving the profession so early for burnout or other reasons. So in those early years, when you're moving over those 18 inches, what are some very important things you think young coaches need to know?
Well, I think that you have to, if you can't find a mentor, someone that you can learn from. I think when we're young, we think we kind of know it all in different aspects of our lives. But specific to coaching, I think that you have to study and you have to learn and you have to, I used to go to a lot of clinics, and there was a lot of clinic talk at clinics. And I kind of switched gears when I was young, and I started to go to practices. I wanted to see what they were really doing, and I didn't want to listen to clinic talk. So I would really go to a lot of different practices, and I learned so much from those practices, watching these coaches live, and then being able to spend time with them afterwards and just pick their brains. So I think the first thing is that you have to kind of learn as much as you can and be a sponge, and just pick some coaches that maybe you like their style and try to learn their style. And I know I tried a lot of different things as a young coach before I kind of settled into my own philosophy. But I think that young coaches need to lean on the veterans, and I'm not sure they are doing that nowadays as much. Not that people would have to call me, but just because I've had my experience for over 40 years, I would be more than happy to help young coaches try to eliminate a lot of the mistakes maybe that I went through as a young coach, and try to help them along. I would be more than happy to devote my time to help young people.
So you mentioned you went to Morton College as a young coach, right? And that
Yep.
coaching out of high school as well. So what did that jump kind of teach you and help you grow as a coach, right? Because it's just a different ball game. JUCO, first of all, is a different ball game than a lot of things, right? If anybody's ever coached JUCO, like me and John and all that, there's a lot of things you have to do, right? Besides the basketball stuff. But how did that help you grow as a coach?
Well, it's a different ball game in some ways, and in some ways it's the same. Different. It varies in this aspect that you obviously have the recruiting component. I came from public high school to Morton College, where recruiting then was a big part of the job. And a lot of those students that I had at the junior college level, some of them needed that extra attention, whether it be to mature, whether to be to advance their game, or to work on their academics. So you wear a lot of different hats as a junior college coach, and quite frankly, it's very challenging, or rewarding, but very challenging to wear all those hats and try to help them. A lot of those kids, they're there because they're trying to get to another level, whether it's to be a Division II player, Division I player for the most part. So you're kind of helping them grow as a person, as a player, academically trying to help them. So it varied that way. But being that I went and coached at a lot of different levels of basketball, basketball is basketball. You still have to block out. You still have to play defense. You still have to shoot the ball. You have to make your free throws. So, I don't, I learned that, some of the coaches at the Division I level had the same issues that we have at the high school level in terms of play, just, teaching them the fundamentals. You do it all through all levels of basketball.
So as you had kind of sort of talked about, your experience at Hinsdale Central, and you had been a head coach at that point for a long time in a lot of different experiences, high school, college. After being a head coach for a while in high school, and now you go back to being an assistant, you had kind of said, you kind of thought your head coaching experiences were over, but how was it going back to being an assistant? You had kind of had your own programs for a long time. What was that experience like?
There's no question that it was an adjustment. It was probably a bigger adjustment than I anticipated. And head coach Nick Latore, he's still the head coach at Hinsdale Central, just a tremendous guy. And he questioned, he didn't know if I could make that transition. And I tried to convince him that I could make that transition. So what was helpful is I tried to really focus in on the defensive side of the basketball, and I felt like he would call me his defensive coordinator. So I think because I had that niche to be coaching and really had a lot of input on the defensive side, I think that little niche that gave me kind of satisfied me coming in with like a practice plan from the defensive standpoint of practice. So that really helped in making that transition, was the input that he gave me, and his ability to lean on me for certain things, being that I had a lot of experience.
So John and I were talking a little bit this about before you jumped on, Coach. But your high school coaching, you've been at really high level athletic schools, Evanston, LT, Brother Rice. And so I'm going to tweak this a little bit, but I guess what makes like certain schools, obviously there's talent and things like that, but kind of those higher level athletic schools that they sustain success. What are some of those ingredients? Whereas sometimes you see some schools that'll struggle at times to sustain that success, or even kind of get that success started. Because what makes like those schools consistently talented, especially athletically and all sports at a higher level?
Well, this Brother Rice, this is my first experience at a private school, so that recruiting element was different than being at Evanston and Lyons Township, where we didn't recruit. We had really good feeder programs and summer programs at the public schools, and really strong at LT and at Brother Rice. I have been very fortunate to have terrific lower level coaches at both places. It's kind of mirrored each other, that both of the freshman coaches I had at Lyons and now at Brother Rice were 30-year freshman coaches, really tremendous fundamental coaches who've been doing it a long time, highly successful. And then both sophomore coaches at both schools really did a great job in getting the players ready for me at the varsity level. So summer programs, feeder programs, and then having a great staff of lower level coaches just makes my job so much easier. When they come to me, they understand the terminology, they understand the expectations of the program. So those are some areas that really are important, because people sometimes think that, oh, you're at a school of about 3,000 or 4,000, you got to be able to get 5 really, really good basketball players. But that's not always the case. You see a lot of smaller high schools that have had great basketball or just sports in general traditions, and it's just more than the amount of students that you can draw from. There's a lot more involved that I mentioned.
So just with that, with because I agree, I think there's small towns in Illinois that become basketball machines, and there's big schools that, as you said, Coach, have 3,000 students, but the basketball program's a mess, or the football program's a mess, or whatever. What do you think are things that you kind of mentioned things that are happening within the program. Maybe what are some larger things that you think some of the more successful athletic programs are doing, maybe outside of just the smaller program, whether it be the school as a whole, the administration, the community, that, those things can carry over into other schools, maybe not doing as well.
Well, you mentioned that some of the smaller towns, they still have very successful programs. Some of these smaller schools and smaller towns, the head coaches are fortunate that, the seventh and eighth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade coaches are kind of running their system. So I know up at, changing gears, but up at New Trier, I know a lot of former New Trier basketball players are coaching at the feeder programs and the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade programs, and they've had sustained success through many coaches at the public school, whether it be through Mel Sheets years ago and through Rick Melnati and now Scott Fricky. They just keep going on. It's like a machine. And that's a public high school that doesn't recruit, that it's a large school. It's not in a small town, but, they take some of their former players who believe in the program and are helping the young kids and helping them get started and knowing, the New Trier way of basketball. So those type of things I think are really, really beneficial. I think having a good nowadays, I didn't grow up with a lot of strength training or weight training, but you have to do that nowadays. So doing this off-season conditioning, whether it be the strength training, whether it's be working with a trainer to improve your basketball skills, kids are doing so much more outside the high school. AAU was not a thing when I was coming through. That was not happening. There weren't even summer leagues. When I was coming through high school, the coaches, I think, would call each other up and just bring their team over, on an evening to kind of scrimmage each other. And the coaches were kind of officiating the scrimmages. So things have changed so much. Like I concern myself with our kids nowadays who go through the spring AAU, and then they come to us in June, and they go back to AAU in July, and they just are not getting a break. I was a multi-sport guy myself. When I started coaching, I coached football, basketball, and baseball when I was coaching lower level at the high school coming out of college. And I'm still a real advocate of that multi-sport kid, but it's so difficult nowadays because everybody is specializing so much that I think it's helpful. I know I'm going I'm going on a little tangent here, but I think that kids can learn so much from coaching or working under different coaches, different leaders, different role models. I think we've kind of gotten away from all that, and it's a shame because I think that helps players become more well-rounded.
So before we get into our the kind of our main topic here in the second half, we call this halftime adjustments. And I wanted to kind of build on our conversation a little bit before we got on air, and you talked about, your shootouts and the live periods you're doing in the summer. But I want to talk to you about how you kind of balance that, right? You're playing in these highly competitive shootouts, right? Helping your kids get exposure, helping your team, challenge them a little bit. But how do you find the balance of having success there and still kind of, building what you want for the actual season, right? Maybe you're making some changes here or tweaking this, or, you got some new players coming in that you're trying to acclimate. So what do you do to try to find that balance of, yes, we want to be competitive and in these games, but also building for the season come, the fall?
Yeah, I've never put a high priority on winning these summer games. I know, as competitors as we are as coaches, I think that you have to kind of sit back and look at the big picture, and the development of your team and your players has to be the top priority in the summer. So we were I when I came to Brother Rice, I was I had a summer league in place already, and we were in a summer league last summer, but I decided to forego playing in a summer league because I think the kids are playing so many games nowadays that I wanted to really focus more on the skill development aspect. So, Monday through Thursday, we're doing skill development, and all of our shootouts are on the weekends. Where last year, we were also playing in summer league on Tuesday and Thursday nights, and I thought that was too much. So what we're doing is we're spending a lot more time on skill development. I'm playing a lot more kids probably than I ever have in these shootouts because I need to get them to get exposure. I need to see what they can do. I need to try to figure out what my rotation is going to be for the year because we only have those 2 weeks before we play a Thanksgiving tournament, and that's not a lot of time. I had to make that adjustment going from college to high school, where we used to have 6 weeks to get ready for a college basketball game, and then when I went to Evanston and had the 2 weeks, boy, that was an adjustment for me to try to fit and get ready to play a game and be able to cover everything, be ready for zones, be ready for presses, everything in a 2-week period of time. So I think that this summer I've got to try to get all of those things in along with the skill development. And so we did cut back on the amount of shootouts and games that we're playing this summer.
So as we move into the second half of the episode, as our listeners know, we like to focus on a specific topic with each of our guests. And we really have not really dived very deep into this, but with you, since you had run so many different programs, we thought the topic of establishing a program culture would be interesting. And the word, I'm sure, Coach, the word culture is so thrown around. But
Yes.
we're going to really kind of dive a little bit deeper into kind of those littler pieces of it. So let's start off with, there's that famous quote that as a coach, you kind of get what you allow. So let's kind of start over with, you take over a program, you're establishing your standards, but now you're kind of talking to your kids about, hey, I give you a lot of freedom in these areas, but, these couple things are my non-negotiables. So maybe what are those non-negotiables to start?
Let me go back to what you said a minute ago.
Yeah.
Taking over a program. The first thing I've taken over, as you know, we've talked about a lot of different programs.
Mhm.
And the first thing I do when I stepped in the door of all those programs is I talked about our high level of expectations. Like if you're not talking about winning a state championship, you're not going to win one. And that doesn't mean that you're going to, make it downstate every year or you're going to win a state championship every year. But I think you have to develop what your expectations are. We're going to shoot for the stars. That's kind of been my philosophy, that you shoot for the stars. You may not get all the way to the top, but you still shoot for the stars. And anybody that's not vying to try to excel in that, something like that, I think are just not are just kind of pulling back in terms of not showing your program, your players, that you're not going for it. And I always felt like I wanted to go for it, and just so those high level expectations right away, and then keeping kids accountable is I think the most important thing. And some of the things that we're looking for in terms of the culture is we talked to players about taking to the coaching, be coachable, be a great teammate, represent your family, your school, and your community in a first class manner. So those non-negotiables that you mentioned, those are things that are non-negotiables. Now, does sometimes that you have to have an individual meeting with a kid? Sure. And then maybe with the parents also. Yes. But I think over the years, I've been fortunate that I've not had to have those type of meetings very often. I think that, kids will try to please you as a coach. Once you show them what the expectations are, they try to meet those expectations. So those are the things that expectations when I went through and took over different programs that were non-negotiable type of things.
So let's expand on that a little bit, right? You just mentioned when you're taking over and the expectations, but kind of, establishing, I guess, you as a coach, right? Every coach has their different personality, their different, things they feel is important. So kind of what was your process when you went into, a new school? And I'm sure if, obviously it's different at every place because there's different needs, right? But
Sure.
establishing, hey, this is how we're gonna play. These are this is me, this is how I do things, right? Because that's important as well. And then maybe what are some of the challenges that if you're a first year coach coming in and trying to set those expectations and those goals for your kids?
Yeah, yeah. When you're first coming in, I think the kids are just trying to feel their way a little bit on what you're all about, and so there's that adjustment period. But I always went into a situation and said, I don't have a 4 year plan. I don't have a 5 year plan. We're going to get after it right away. And I've been fortunate that taking over programs, we've kind of turned things really, really quickly. And I think it's because that my expectations were, I'm not very patient, and to a fault maybe, but I think that has helped me get different programs going at a quicker rate because of my lack of patience in certain areas. So the big umbrella that I bring to every program has been play hard, play smart, play together. And I always tell them it always goes back to that if you're going to do those things, if our team is going to do those three things, that success will take care of itself. In terms of style of play, I've had to change my style of play in different situations, like you mentioned. When I was at Evanston, we had more athletic type of kids, so we were more up tempo. At Evanston, when I went to Lions, we didn't have quite the athletes we had at Evanston, so we were more of a half court team, a little bit more methodical. So as a coach, have had to make adjustments within my own philosophy of how I've wanted to play. Um, come, I've had a very interesting, unique situation. When I came into Brother Rice, I got the job in late July, and I did not have a whole summer with the players. I didn't know these players, so that was a unique situation that I had not encountered over my entire career. So I had to get to know these players in the fall, have those 2 weeks before we played a game to implement a system, and that was challenging. I would have liked to. We were pretty athletic with my first team at Brother Rice, but I had to make some decisions because you can't do everything well, especially in a short period of time. So I wanted to make sure, we probably could have done a lot more pressing, but again, I didn't want to spread ourselves thin where we were not good at anything. So I wanted to make sure that we were good, from the 3 point line and in, from the defensive end and the offensive end. So that was unique. That was challenging, but very rewarding at the end. So I think throughout my different stops, I've had to adjust style of play, especially when you're not able to recruit and you're in a public school. I think it's a challenge to do that, but I think it's a challenge that I will always look forward to, is trying to find what's in the best interest, ability wise, of our team.
So I want to follow on that a little bit, Coach. Because I think what you said is important, right? Trying to be good at everything, you're not good at anything, right?
Yeah.
So, what is kind of your process for kind of looking at that and figuring that out, right? Like sometimes you got to just narrow it down, right? And really look at, okay, what can we be good at right now? And then, maybe as the season goes on, you build on that. So kind of how did you go about determining what you were going to be good at for these teams, and the process of looking at it in the bigger picture to find out what's best for you that given year or for that program?
Well, the constant with me, I'm a defensive coach. And if you walked into my practice, or if you walked into any coach's practice, you could probably tell within the first half hour or so, what this coach emphasizes, what type of coach he is. And if you walked into one of my practices, I don't care where I've been, we've tried to build the program from the defensive end. I think that's more of a constant, as you know. I think that, you never know how you're going to shoot the basketball. So the thing that I try to emphasize was our philosophy is to try to keep the ball out of the house, meaning the lane, as much as possible, holding teams to one shot. I think if it boiled down to, if I had to pick a couple of things, those were the things that I have really emphasized on all of my stops. I wouldn't call myself a very innovative offensive coach. I always believed in simplicity with execution. I had three mentors in my career. One was my high school coach, who really taught me how to be a role model as a coach. And then there was a coach at Lions who won a state championship, Ron Nikovich, years ago, won over 500 games. And he was a 1-3-1 guy, and he was a pick and roll guy. And that was it. You knew what was coming, but it was simplicity with execution. And then I learned from Pete Gillen at Xavier how to prepare for a game preparation. So I would say that from a defensive end, that's what I am. I'm a defensive coach first because of the constant that you need to be successful. And then off from the offensive end, I'm just a guy that loves to move the ball side to side with simplicity and execution. And I never wanted my players to be robots. Years ago, when I was in high school and in college, I used to go to the famous Proviso West tournament and sit up in the stands in the top row and watch all these different coaches and these different teams. And I used to see some teams hold the ball at the end of games and try to hold the ball for over a minute and just turn the ball over late in games. And I never wanted my teams to do that. I always wanted them to not be robots. If they saw something that was available, I wanted them to be aggressive offensively. So those are some of the things that I have used through all my different stops. That is kind of my blueprint. That any of the success that we've had is to just be, a constant defensively and move the ball and be unselfish offensively. So I've never, said that I've been a real innovative coach. Now, saying that, I tried last summer to look at the dribble drive offense. Okay. I said to myself, a lot of these kids are playing AAU and they're taking the ball off the dribble all the time. I'm saying maybe we should play to their strengths, what they do a lot, especially when they go and play AAU basketball. But that didn't last very long because I felt like we were taking way too many quick shots and we weren't moving the ball, and it was kind of going against my philosophy. So I kind of scrapped that last summer, and then we went back to what I know, what I believe in, and we were having a very difficult time with shot selection. So about midway through last year, I put in one of our segments, rate a shot, where it wasn't a competition to see who was going to beat the other team, but I would rate their shots. Like a 4 was an excellent shot, 3 was good, 2 was average, 1 was poor, and 0 was a bad shot. And I'm going to tell you, our shot selection improved so much by me implementing this simple 10-minute rate a shot segment into our practices. So I still feel like I'm still learning. I try to look at that, like I said, the dribble drive to kind of evolve as a coach at this stage in my career. But I found that you have to go back to what you believe in and the principles that you believe in and what you think your teams will do to be successful.
Coach John's teasing me here because I talk about rating shots all the time because it drives me nuts.
He does.
Yeah.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, this is Todd's new best friend.
But I wanted to follow on something you said earlier in the preparation part, because I think that's a great topic right? Because you've gone through different iterations, right, of scouting and different levels, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, how have you kind of adjusted over the years to, I mean, now everything's more technological, right? Like, and I've been thinking about this a lot too with our college girls of, how can we get the information we need, but not have to spend their time sitting looking at film, because I think, just the way kids are wired today, that's hard for them, right? So kind of how have you gone about that process, and what do you kind of do to get your information out, but get it out in a concise way?
Yeah, I try to limit, my assistant, Jim Ziglich, he does a great job, and also our game preparation. And, I've tried to, get us to limit the amount of time that we're watching film. So, like everybody else, we make highlight tape where we just take clips of our opponents defensively and offensively, and try to make it, as short as possible because of that attention span. And you can kind of see it when you're looking around the room as I'm observing our players, and you can see if they're staying focused or not. So yeah, keeping it short, I think is really, really important. And getting on the floor, I'm always a guy that likes people to do things physically, demonstration type of things. I've not been a really big video guy. I like doing things on the floor. I think that's where I feel I teach better, and I think that our players, I really feel like, have been more receptive in terms of understanding things is actually doing it.
So, obviously along the way, every place you go, you have things that get in the way, right? There's obstacles, there's challenge, um, when you're, early at Evanston, you had a losing season, and then Lions, and then you struggled a little bit early, and then you went downstate. So when you kind of see those obstacles, right? What do you kind of trying to help your players see the bigger picture, and your staff to say, yeah, we didn't have the result we wanted, but we're in the right direction, because I think that's hard to see the bigger picture a lot at times, right? You know, it's
It
a lot
yeah,
of instant gratification. So kind of how did you go about that, and keeping everything on the path to now, okay, we're having that success.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's important that you try to win these little games, win these little things. I've never ever talked about winning with my teams. I've never said we've got to win X amount of games, or this is a big win. We need this game to win the con. I've never talked about winning. Um, but so I've got these game goal charts in our locker room, and I try to get wins that way. Whether it's, we try to hold teams, an example, under 42% from twos and under 30% from threes. So I try to use those game goals as our wins. And, I put a blue check mark if we accomplish it. I put a red mark if we don't. So I think that we're trying to win these little battles within the game. I think helps that, okay, we did this really well. Let's keep doing this well. But here, look at this. Our free throw percentage, wasn't we didn't get our goal for free throw percentage. So, we're going to put extra time into that, or whatever it might be, turnovers. So I think winning those little games within the game, I think, is important, because you can get wins within the game that shows that we're making progress.
So just a quick question then. I don't know if you've actually done it, but kind of, have you ever looked at, okay, when we win X amount of these things, we tend to win more games? I mean, you've done like the percentages on it, or what,
Oh yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
you get 3 out of 5 or whatever it may be.
Well, if I just took, we've got about, I would say, I think I have about 8 categories on this is game goal chart. But if we hold teams under 42 and under 30 from shooting, and we win the rebound battle by plus 10, I think it's like at least 80% we've won our games. So I could limit my chart, which I won't do, because we want to be successful in all areas. But if I limit it to those 3 columns, that we would win a lot of games by doing that. And I show them that okay, I keep this board up, and then when we go back and look at our success or our not having success, looking back at some of the games, I'll say, okay, we won this game. Look at our line across this game goal chart. Okay, now look at this line where we didn't win. And I think it really gets the kids to kind of look at something that's tangible, like, okay, we need to do those things to be successful. I think that's been very helpful. So kids kind of understand that, these areas are really important for the success of our team.
So as we get into our last two segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout, and it's your opportunity to kind of talk about whatever you would like to discuss. It could be yourself, your family, your program, something you want our listeners to know about. Sometimes people turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question. So it's kind of and I promise there's no referee in your timeout telling you your 30 seconds is up. It's kind of your dime, your dance floor.
Okay, I'm going to go into maybe a couple different areas, some interesting things that have happened to me over the course of my career. When I went to Xavier and had my first scouting report situation that I had to do, the other assistants warned me. They said, you better find out what kind of ball is being used in the game. So I think I was scouting at Notre Dame. So I had to go over to the scorer's table before the game and look at to see what type of ball it was, whether it was a Wilson, a Spalding, whatever it might be. And I had to write that at the top of my scouting report. So when I came back, the head coach, he thought he didn't know I got tipped off. So he says, Coach Stamas, all right, what type of ball are we going to be playing with at Notre Dame? And thankfully, those guys helped me out. And I said, oh, we're playing with a Wilson. So he goes, okay. So one of the managers, get the Wilson ball out. So we had all of these different type of basketballs on our rack. So he wanted us to be practicing prior to that next game with the ball that we were going to be using. So he was that detailed. So I thought that was very interesting, because if I wasn't tipped off, I would have had no clue. And my first scouting job, maybe I'd have gotten fired. So that was kind of something that was really interesting. And then from a recruiting standpoint, we had a kid that we were recruiting that ended up getting drafted in the second round of the NBA, Derek Strong out of Los Angeles. He was reluctant to come all the way to Cincinnati. So we simply said, Derek, it's, LA to Cincinnati, it's only 3 hours away. And he didn't, I guess, realize that it's a 3-hour plane ride, but it's pretty far from LA to Cincinnati. So we convinced him to make the trip. And the poor kid got off the plane, and it was the dead of winter, and he had a short sleeve shirt on. So very, very interesting recruiting thing. Oh, Aaron Williams was from Rolling Meadows High School here in Chicago. So we bring him in to see our facility, and lo and behold, we played at the old Cincinnati Gardens at the time, where the Cincinnati Royals played. So it was an old facility. So we're ready to bring him in, and lo and behold, we didn't realize they had some kind of rodeo the night before. So we bring him into the Cincinnati Gardens, and all you saw was dirt and horse manure and all. So we're trying to sell this kid on our facility, and we're walking through mud and saying, okay, this is where the one end of the basket is. So it's some different things happen through the recruiting process that's so funny and so interesting sometimes, that it's been quite a ride, quite a journey. This afforded me to meet so many people. I was able to go to Tokyo. We played in a tournament in Tokyo when I was at Xavier. So I was able to go outside the country. So basketball has been so rich and fulfilling to me, and not just the coaching standpoint, but the relationships, the travel, getting to know people. I couldn't have asked for a better career, and I'm so thankful that my dad sat me down when I was in high school, and we kind of figured out, which direction that I was going to go with in terms of my life and my career.
So last segment here, Coach, we call this quick hitters, just kind of rapid random fire questions. I'm going to tweak this one a little bit because you talked about it a little bit, but maybe just another good story from your college days, whether it was a recruit that you didn't think you could get. You mentioned the basketball. I think kids would probably look at you now and say, "What, coach? We're using a Wilson?" Like they wouldn't have an
Right.
idea of what that even meant. But maybe just a fun story, maybe of something, with a coach you worked for or a kid or whatever it may be.
Well, staying on the topic of a basketball, one year we were going to play at the Proviso West Christmas turn. I think I was at Lions at the time, and they introduced the wave basketball. I don't know if you guys remember that wave ball.
Yeah.
And we
Yes.
were we were playing the home school Proviso West, who was using that ball, and I refused to start the game because I said that's not a legal ball, and it was probably legal, but I just convinced the officials. And Mark Schneider, who's a friend, who was the coach at Proviso West, I said, "We're not playing. I'm not playing this game with an illegal ball." So I made them change from the wave ball to a regular, seamed basketball. So that was kind of interesting. I can't kind of shocked that they believed me when I called it an illegal basketball. I don't know if it was or not. I'm sure it was legal. So yeah,
Awesome.
that was an interesting story. Oh, and then at the same tournament, the same game, they never had it stipulated in the. And I was trying to get an advantage, of course. They never stipulated that the home school, if they were playing in their Christmas shirt, they'd get their home bench. So they said, okay, the team wearing white or whatever would sit at this bench. So Proviso West had to sit on the visiting bench,
I
which
love
they
that.
weren't used to doing.
Awesome.
So they asked me to switch benches, and I said no. According to this tournament rules, this is where we're supposed to be. So again, looking for every little advantage over the years within the rules to try to be successful.
Yeah, John and I have those arguments all the time with the referees. I know John does about the color of the ladies' headbands that they
All
use
the
Yeah,
time.
all the time. I was told once that the headband wasn't the right hue of blue. I was like, I didn't know I was in art class here. Like, it's blue.
one
Like,
year,
that's
one
that's
one year at Xavier, Ricky Birdsong, who passed away, who was the coach at Northwestern, but prior to that, he was at University of Detroit, and he came into our facility at the Cincinnati Gardens, and he flipped the basket. You know how you go to the opposite basket?
Yeah.
So he flipped the baskets to try to throw us off, and he went the other direction to start the game. He asked to go the other direction. I think nowadays I don't think you have that choice to do that. But as a visiting team, he asked to go the other direction. So it's interesting how we all try to get some type of little advantage to be successful.
All right, so we got the biggest. If you had to pick one big change you've made in your career, what would you say is a big change you've made?
Oh wow! I think going from probably a multi defensive coach, meaning playing zone and man, to right now just playing man to man. I think that's probably my biggest change is again, it's that simplicity with execution. When we're playing some 1-3-1 back in the day and playing man, going back to what Todd said, it's hard to be good at everything.
Yep.
So I've really kind of like narrowed things down again. So I think, giving up being a multi defensive coach or program to just be, a man to man type of defensive coach. So I think that's a big change because I tried to do both. And I just felt like, like a 1-3-1 defense, if one person's out of position, you're giving up maybe a layup. If the wind's not dropping down properly or somebody's not in the passing lane, slowing the ball across the top, your baseline man can't get corner to corner. If one guy's out of sync, it really, really hurts your defense. So I just felt like we were spreading ourselves too thin. So I think just being really simple in the things that we've done defensively is probably one of the bigger changes that I've made.
all right. Are you a board game guy or a card game guy?
Board game,
What's your favorite board game?
probably Monopoly.
Oh, there we go. You're in it for the long haul, huh?
Yeah.
If you were going to go on vacation, would you rather go somewhere towards the West Coast or somewhere towards the East Coast?
100% West Coast. I want to get out of this cold winters here. In fact, when I decide to stop coaching, I will not be here during the winter.
Smart man. Smart man. All right. This is one of our favorite questions because John and I will keep a list and go all these places. But when you're going to get something to eat, like maybe you have a big game, you're meeting with your coaches, where's your favorite place to go eat? What do you get?
Well, I didn't think we were going to go the nutrition aspect, but I am pretty disciplined in what I eat. So if I had to pick the healthiest place to go out and eat, probably Chipotle.
Okay.
It's a good choice.
Yeah.
And then we usually finish with this one with a lot of guests. What's a new trend in coaching that you're looking into? Maybe not necessarily doing with your team, but just looking at.
Well, this is a topic that I'm very concerned about, and it's trickled down from college, is the transfers.
Yeah.
And I'm not, we had a transfer last year. We have a transfer this year, but it's starting to become really rampant now at the high school level. And there's so much movement with transfers that I'm actually not fond of it. I'm concerned about it. It's hard, you talked about culture. We talked about culture. How do you build a culture when you have a kid for like 8 months?
Yep.
And so I'm concerned with the direction, with our sport, with regards to the transfers, and just not a big fan in the direction we're going with that.
Coach, this was an excellent episode. I think Todd and I could, as I kind of said before, continue on for a couple more hours. But thank you so much. I think our guests will love this episode, and thank you for taking your time today.
Oh, I'm happy to be with you guys, sharing basketball with the both of you. And it's been really, really enjoyable for me to kind of look back and look at the journey that I've had and the journey I'm still on. And so thank you for letting me go down memory lane a little bit.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in-game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you.